Welcome to an overview video of IntelliTrack Assets. During this video, I'll be providing a high-level tour of our IntelliTrack Assets application, and I'll show you how easy it is to use our application to help with tracking your organization's valuable assets. The first thing I'd like to point out is the ability for IntelliTrack Assets to help with tracking both fixed assets as well as rotational assets. So fixed assets are typically things that are fairly stationary. They don't move around a lot. They're of a certain value, so your organization finds that it's important to track those assets because they have a certain dollar value associated with them, and you periodically want to perform an inventory of those assets. But in general, those assets don't move around that often. So examples of those might be things like a desk in a conference room, furniture in an office, IT equipment that might not move around that much, like a desktop computer. Those are good examples of fixed assets, and our IntelliTrack Assets application can absolutely help with tracking those kinds of things. Additionally, though, we help with tracking unique rotational assets, things that move around quite a bit. So, for example, an iPhone that might get assigned to an employee when they first start for their job. We want to assign and check that iPhone out to that individual, and they are responsible for it until they are done with it and bring it back to us. Also, examples of tools, equipment that might be required to perform a job on a daily or for some duration basis. That equipment, unique, we want to understand its nature. So, for example, an air mover, an air compressor, a high-end drill, anything that we have of a certain value that's going to go out, get assigned to an individual, be checked out, and then that we want to ensure that that individual brings that equipment back. So we'll be looking at both of those scenarios during this video tour today. With IntelliTrack Assets, you can manage your company's fixed assets with incredible accuracy and do so very easily as well. So let me show you with our IntelliTrack Assets application, I can bring up a list of all of our assets. And if we're focusing on the fixed asset management functionality within our application, the first thing I do is probably point out the ability to manage an asset's depreciation. So each asset is tied to a particular class, and that depreciation class is what determines how depreciation is going to be calculated. So in this account that I'm using today here for our demo, if I edit one of these depreciation classes, you'll see that I've defined a particular class using a straight line method of depreciation calculation. We actually support manual, straight line, 150% declining, 200% declining, and the sum of years digits methods. In this case, the most common is straight line. That's what I've set up here. I've set a life, I've set a period of time for this to work off of, and then I've tied each individual asset that I've created with this particular class. So if we look at our first item, and if we take a look at the desktop computer, you can see here at the item level is where I created the relationship between the depreciation class and the item or the parent record for the asset. And then at the individual asset record, if I go in and edit, for example, conference room desk, let's go ahead and add a brand new asset, and the system automatically generates my asset number for me. I can record the serial number for the desk, this conference room desk. I can indicate the building, the site, and the location, the office in this case, where this particular asset is. I can fill out other key fields that are important, would be things like the purchase date, when our company came into possession of this particular asset, how much it cost us when we bought it. We could track a warranty expiration date if we had one. We can track a condition. We could note an account. And then we can move over to the depreciation tab. And because this is a conference room desk and that's associated with the furniture depreciation class, all of this header information is already populated. So the only things left to note here are the in-service date, which would be the same day, let's say a few days later than when we purchased it. The salvage value, what I expect to get for this asset when all is said and done. And then I can simply click the Calculate Depreciation button. The system will automatically do the math and fill in all of the other information based upon the dates and values I've predefined. So that's one way to do it. You can do it one at a time. You can also do it in a bulk fashion. If you go into Assets, Depreciation Classes, here you'll see for Calculate Depreciation for a given class or Calculate Depreciation for all classes. You'll say OK, the system's run through, calculated everything, and stored that information for us. This asset depreciation information now is also available to us in the reporting section. The next thing I'd like to show when it comes to working with assets in the system is our IntelliTrack inventory, the IntelliTrack mobile application, which has a function available specifically for tracking assets, and that's the inventory transaction. So we can go in and using this particular form, this is the most ideal form that allows me to go out and perform an inventory for each location. So I can walk into an office, I could scan the barcode for that office, and immediately the system would look up and tell me that I have 0 assets inventoried, 3 assets remaining to be inventoried, and 0 that are new, that aren't associated with this location. If I don't know what I need to look for, perhaps if I'm a new employee or I can't seem to find, it's a cluttered space, I could always tap on the ellipsis button here and then get a sense of the assets that I'm supposed to find. We can see it's a desktop computer, a desktop inkjet printer, and get a listing of the assets that I'm supposed to find. So now my job is simply to go around and scan the assets, increment the counters, click Save. That transaction is processed, and I move to the next office. Office 102. I scan the barcode, and there happen to be 2 assets in this location that I need to find. Again, I can simply walk around and scan them. I could tap to get an indication of which assets I need to find, and then when I get the visual and I actually find the barcode on the asset, I can scan it. It increments my counters. I save the entire transaction, and now the inventory date has been updated on those assets. So all of the history of that having occurred on the portable is kept track of. If we go to Reports and History, we can bring up a view. We can sort this particular view, descending from today's date, and we can see that the user who's logged in was performing asset inventory. We can see the particular assets that they happen to have were affected. We can turn on asset number as one of the fields we want to look at. And then now I can see what actually was inventoried today, by who, at what day, what time. IntelliTrack Assets makes it very easy to work with and manage unique rotational assets. Assets that are going to be checked out, typically at the beginning of the day or the beginning of a project, and then checked back in when they're no longer needed, giving us assurance that we have that asset back in our possession. And if not, letting us know where it is or the last person to have been issued that particular asset. So what I'm going to do to first talk about how we properly work with check-in, check-out types of assets. The example, always a very common example, is either a tool crib or, for example, a job locker where we have unique tools that are going to go out and have to come back in. So I went ahead and created 2 different items an air mover item, and an air compressor item. We're going to go ahead and add assets to each of these. I'm going to click my Add Assets button, and I'm just going to go through the basic data entry for adding a new asset. And the first thing I want to do is stipulate the site and the location of where this asset exists when it's checked in. In this case, it's going to be our tool crib. Then I'm going to go right down the road here to the next tab. I'm going to punch in a maintenance date. I'm going to punch in a calibration period. And that's it for now. I'm going to go ahead and save this asset. The system validates everything that's in there. I'm going to close that. And now we're going to go ahead and create an air compressor. So again, I'm going to click on the assets, click the Add Asset button. The system's going to automatically generate our asset number for me based upon my settings here. I'm going to punch in a serial number, indicate a site, which is building 1, and a location, which is tool crib. And again, the only thing I'm going to stop to fill out is the maintenance and calibration period on this particular asset. I'm going to click the Save button. I'm going to close the Add Asset form. And we're going to go back to our asset data. And we now have 2 examples of rotational tools that we want to track as they go out and come back in. So now let's work towards showing how to perform a checkout transaction. Because IntelliTrack Assets is flexible, it allows you to approach a checkout transaction in a couple of different ways. The first that I'll show you is the Assets checkout transaction from the PC application. This is a formal checkout transaction, easy enough to perform, but gives you quite a bit of data that you can fill in and manipulate if you like, or keep it very simple. And that's what I'll do here, which is simply to scan a person's badge. So in this case, 00001, test user 1 is this person's name. Scan the asset that we want to check out to this particular person, which I can choose from a drop-down. I can type in or I can scan. And then we can record a comment if we need one. I'm going to go ahead and add that line item to the transaction, and then we could continue scanning multiple assets. They would all get grouped underneath this singular transaction. They would all get checked out to, in this case, test user 1, and would be a way for us to quickly and easily move through a whole bunch of tools if one person needed them in the morning, check them all out to that person, and then have them, bring them back when they're done with them. For this scenario, I'm going to stop with just a singular line item, asset 112. I'm going to save the transaction, the screen clears, and I'm ready to do my next checkout. We can see that the checkout has successfully completed because if we come back to assets data, we'll see that that asset is now flagged as checked out, and the assignee is 0001 test user 1. If we edit the asset, additionally, we keep track of the fact that it's checked out here on the checked out tab with all of this historical information being kept track of. We know who's in possession of that particular asset. The other approach to performing a checkout is also from the PC, but it's using a different form. It's called the Rapid Check-in Out form. And this is done using a series of transactional barcodes, the first of which would be to say, what are we doing? Are we checking something out or checking something in? Then we would scan the person's badge, and then we would scan the asset that we want to check out to that person. And we would continue repeating the assets that we want to check out to that person until we're done, when we would scan a final transactional barcode to save the transaction, clear the screen, and now the next person can walk up and I can scan their badge, scan the assets that I want associated with them, and continue that process. This is really ideal and useful for scenarios where in the morning you have a queue of folks lined up ready to begin taking possession of the tools or equipment they need. You can rapidly process that queue of individuals and get them all the material they need very quickly and easily. And then likewise at the end of the day, you can perform the same process but check the material back in using the same form. Lastly here, what I'd like to show is the mobile transaction. So let's go back to the main screen on the portable and look at Assets, Checkout, and take a look at the ability to first select, as part of the checkout transaction, who are we checking things out to. And on the mobile application, you can either scan a person's badge or you can look them up from a list. So we can choose the person's ID. We can go ahead and have an order number generated by the system for this transaction. And these fields, you'll note, are lockable. So if I want to loop on simply asset number and check out a whole bunch of equipment to this test user using the mobile app, we can do that. So now it's simply a matter of scanning the asset out to this particular person. The transaction processes, we save it. Well, we don't actually need, so 1002. The screen clears and it automatically saves it. So those are all completed and processed. If we cancel out of there, that data is also immediately uploaded and available in our asset data screen. And a great way to do this is to say only show me assets where it's checked, and we can see the 4 assets that we've now successfully checked out to individuals. 2 of them are with test user 1 and 2 of them are with test user 2. The same process on the portable, we can use it to check equipment back in as well. Performing a check-in in IntelliTrack Mobile is very straightforward, easy to do. We simply choose from the Assets menu the check-in transaction. We can go ahead and have the system generate an order number for us and lock that down. And then we can simply scan the asset number. The screen clears, that's immediately processed and validated, and we can continue to scan the asset numbers that we want to check back in. If we come back to the PC and take a look at our asset data, we'll notice that we have 2 less assets checked out. It's only assets 112 and 113. So we can perform a check-in process on the PC as well. We could do so using the rapid check-in out screen. The only difference to what I showed earlier is the fact that the transactional barcode is a check-in barcode. The user is denoted and then the asset is scanned. Lastly, a transactional barcode is scanned to save and clear the screen. Once again, we'll step back to the asset data screen. We'll see that our list has shrunk. We're down to a singular asset now that's still checked out. And so lastly, we'll choose Assets Check-in to open up the formal check-in screen on the PC to go ahead and check an asset back in. I would like to take this opportunity to make one note about the check-in process here. It defaults to checking the asset back into its normal site and location, which in this case is my tool crib. If I wanted to change that, it is possible from here to just change the drop-down to a different location. So you do have that flexibility, but if you don't need to do that, you simply add the assets that you're going to check back in to this transaction. When you've completed checking them all in by scanning them, you finally click the Save button down here. And then again, we come back to asset data and all of our assets are checked back in. Nothing is currently flagged as checked out. So what I'd like to do next is talk about a feature called Reservations. Reservations in IntelliTrack Assets allows our customers to manage future use of assets and prevent them from accidentally being unavailable when they might be needed for a specific job. So we can create a reservation, assign assets to that reservation, and note the start date and end date. And so I'd like to show you that process now. It's simple enough once you have the reservations form open, which is accessed from Assets Reservations. Click on the Add button to start a new reservation. The system will automatically assign a reservation number. A description can be put in for this particular reservation. The assignee, which is who is requesting this reservation and is going to be effectively responsible for these assets when the reservation comes due. And then we can put a date timeline in it. We can have a start date and an end date, and then we can choose the assets that we want to place on this reservation. There are a couple of ways to do this. We can actually choose from a drop-down list and add them. Simple enough by choosing from this value here. This can be scanned or typed in obviously as well. Or you can actually click on the Browse Assets tab, and then we get a visual that will show in a more concise, complete grid the asset, the item, the description, the serial number, so you can make better decisions about what assets you want to place onto this reservation. If there is a picture associated with the asset, which you can see there is for 10,006, that thumbnail will be displayed and you can actually hover over it and bring up a bigger version of that same picture. So if we choose one or two more assets that we want to place on this reservation, we can simply check them off, click the Save button, and those assets now are successfully added to a reservation. And a user will be prevented from checking those assets out should they go to select them during those dates. Additionally, there is a maintenance and calibration feature that is very useful for a lot of folks. This allows you to leverage IntelliTrack Assets to help make sure that maintenance and calibration are being performed on each and every asset that you have. The system will help you keep track of when maintenance and calibration are due next and when they've been performed. And basically it's a process of selecting an asset. If you need to consume consumable inventory, if you have our combined product of IntelliTrack Inventory plus IntelliTrack Assets, you can leverage the consumption of inventory during the maintenance transaction. Or you can simply just check off and say, yes, I want to proceed without assigning any items to the maintenance calibration transaction. And the maintenance is performed for that given asset. So it's always going to warn you there. We can come back and we can flag and say we also want to do calibration. And I'll show you what this is doing is simply assigning and calculating the dates and keeping the system up to date. The screen clears each time a new maintenance transaction is performed. But if we come back to our asset data and we look at asset 1000, we edit the record. Maintenance and calibration is flagged as the last time maintenance was done was today. The next time it's due is 90 days from now. And again, calibration was done on today's date and it's due a year from now. So the system automatically calculates all of that, and this is also available to you in a report format. So maintenance and calibration are quite useful. We also, when an asset reaches the end of its useful life, we have the ability to actually retire an asset. And that can be done either from the PC screen here by selecting this icon, the thumbs down button, and it will warn you, do you want to retire an asset? And you can say okay. You can also access that transaction on the mobile by choosing retire and scanning the asset here. What that does is it moves the asset from a valid working asset that's active in your inventory and puts it into an inactive state, if you will. And it would not show up by default unless you checked off this little flag down here, which would then show all of the retired assets that have also been moved into history. IntelliTrack Assets offers you numerous options for working with, viewing, and managing your data. Throughout the video tour today, I've shown the asset data screen, which is a grid view of your data. It's a summary view, a snapshot, if you will, of your asset data on hand. This grid, as you've seen throughout the video tour, provides the ability to sort your data, rearrange the order of your data, filter the information that's available to you, and all of this data is easily exportable with one click to various formatted files, as you see down below. We also have reporting built into IntelliTrack Assets. The report options are various. You have a number of pre-built reports that allow you to view your data in different ways. I'm going to run a simple example of an asset by category report. This is a nice view that groups by category our asset data on hand currently and even provides a valuation of the assets that we have. And we also have the ability to print up the transactional barcodes that I talked about earlier during our rapid check-in out demonstration. Here are the transactional barcodes on one page. These could be printed, attached to the desk or the wall to perform those transactional barcodes if the rapid check-in out piece function is appropriate for your situation. Lastly, we have the ability to view and print barcode labels. Again, pre-built barcode labels that are available to you. So if I wanted to generate asset barcodes from within the system, that can easily be done. I choose the type of label I want, the size of the label I want, and then the data. If I need to filter it, I can, and it generates the barcodes for my assets. Thank you for watching today this video tour of our IntelliTrack Assets application. Please contact us for more information. We'd be happy to provide a demo account, answer any technical questions that you may have, or provide pricing. You can reach us at 888-583-3008 option 8. We look forward to working with you.